Hello, here we are already on Module 10, moving our way along. Only two modules left after this one. Module 10, the focus is on gender equality and sexual equality, and really the focus of all of the readings is along the lines, the basic gist revolves around the whole idea that segregating men's and women's sports into two separate entities um, at least contributes to inequality, or that's kind of the root, I guess I would say, of the arguments. And all of the readings have some relationship to the first one, which is a essay by English and was written in the late 70s and is a pretty well-known piece. So the other three readings kind of go off of that or are responses to each other. And yeah, I guess I would say that from my perspective, I thought they were all very interesting and some really pretty uh, unique and controversial ideas in some of the readings. So I'm looking forward to discussing them. And the thing that I guess really stood out to me as I read through all of them is I think in this area in particular, um, as Christians, we have some unique perspectives just on human nature and what it means to be an image bearer of God. And yeah, I'm interested to see, your thoughts on how that affects, our view of this topic. So just a quick summary of the different readings. English, her reading kind of begins with kind of an argument that the reality of physiology and genetics kind of trumps any of these ideas about equality in sports. And so she makes the argument that, if we're really going to have equality, we need to do some things to level the playing field, so to speak. She also has an argument in there which is kind of notable, that there are two different areas of benefits in sport. One is basic benefits, which is just like the health and the skills and the fun that are derived from participating. And the other she calls scarce benefits, and those are the benefits like recognition, prizes, and pay. And she makes a distinction there because the argument is kind of that those basic benefits are derived no matter what, but you can't really get the scarce benefits unless there's a level playing field between male and female, which is kind of where the arguments come from, that we shouldn't have gender separation because that kind of limits females' ability to benefit from the scarce benefits. And really, at the end of the day, I think that has to do with pay, in professional sports and the recognition and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, she proposes the following three things to make athletics more equal for women. One of them is grouping by ability instead of gender. So instead of having male and female sports, we would have categories based on ability, and that would, at least at some level, give females the opportunity to compete with males. Another thing she proposes is having some sports protected as female-only sports that would allow them to get scarce benefits, and she doesn't propose any, but I would guess it would be something like maybe women's professional basketball or something like that, a sport that gets a fair amount of recognition and where the athletes get paid pretty well. And then her third proposal is creating new sports that cater towards women's strengths and would only be women allowed to participate in those sports. And again, with the idea that they could reap, some of those scarce benefits. The next article is written by Sailors, and the first half of the article, he just basically refutes almost every argument that English makes. He thinks that it's all just way too limiting, or she thinks that it's all way too limiting. Sailor's main argument is that we should make distinctions in the way that we organize sports, and she has a number of different things. She thinks there should be a distinction between sports that involve direct competition versus direct competition between a clock or a course. And that distinction should be made to protect women from aggressive competition. Another distinction should be between contact sports and non-contact. A third distinction between pro and amateur. And the argument is that the distinctions would give women greater opportunities to influence the sports toward their strengths, instead of the sports being pretty much dictated by male interests. And that's kind of her argument, is the way we currently do it. Sports end up being very, very much dictated by the strengths of males and what they're interested in and all of that type of thing. So, I'm not real clear on how that would really exactly work, but that was her argument. The next article is probably the most out there one, Tamburini and Tanjo. And the gist of this argument, they again refute English, and they argue that just segregating sports in and of itself is discrimination. So they don't think there should be any kind of segregation between males and females. And, if you don't do that, you're left with the obvious problem of the genetic, physiological, and strength differences, size differences between males and females. And their solution to that is what's so controversial and interesting. And just to put it in a nutshell, it's just basically genetic engineering is their solution. So their argument is women should be genetically engineered to be as strong and physiologically equal to men as possible. There's a lot of questions that come to my mind about that, but that can maybe come out on the discussion board. I won't say too much at this point. And then the last one by Harris and Giordano is a response to that article by Tamburini and Tanjo. And their main arguments refuting Tamburini and Tanjo is that they argue that really ultimately the arguments they make are sexist. One initial argument they make is, why have women try to get to the level of men? Why not have men level down to women? So genetically engineering men to be weaker and more physiological, the same as women, which I think is a fair argument. They also have a problem with the whole idea that comes out in the Tamburini and Tanjo article, that physical and moral equality are the same thing. And they kind of get into what's the definition of equality, which I think is a really good question when it comes to this whole argument. And I hope to bring that out on the discussion board a little bit also, because, their question is, does equality mean that we have to be exactly identical? And their argument is that is not the case. They feel that moral equality entails a celebration of differences that distinguish human beings. And I personally feel that is a good argument also, that to me is more consistent with a biblical worldview. And then, like I said, they also argue that equal treatment is not identical treatment. And that comes down to how you define equality. So yeah, looking forward to this discussion. I think it will be an interesting one. It's somewhat unfortunate that we have such a majority of males in the class. So I'm definitely gonna be looking forward to the female perspective on this from our ladies, and kind of delving into the ethical issues related to this.